We kick off Irresistible with the funeral of a young lady, which we know will go badly because this is the X-Files and we don't tune in each week for normalcy. Hi, I'm Donnie. I'll be your creepy mofo for the evening. Unfortunately, thanks to the network, I won't be humping your daughter's dead corpse, but I can offer you our defiling a corpse package at a very reasonable rate. Yes, Donnie here was supposed to be a necrophiliac, but Fox said, "No, Chris, this is too disgusting even by your standards." So he will become a death fetishist. Although most of the time they're just going to use the term fetishist, which I'm sure is kind of off-putting if you're into something harmless. Whoa, whoa, whoa! I like to lick girls' feet. That doesn't make me some kind of freak here like the guy who gets a hard-on off of dead people. And yeah, the guy is so creepy brushing the dead girl's hair, I'm honestly surprised he didn't accidentally close the coffin lid on his own erection. Later, as the guy who runs the funeral home is doing whatever the hell they do after hours, he senses someone there. Damn, another hoary host of the netherworld, and I had just sprayed too. Now it's just Donnie, who is here collecting hair and fingernails from the dead girl for reasons we'll try not to think about. Well, for that, Donnie is so frickin' fired, but obviously won't take that for an answer, because soon Mulder and Scully are here with Agent Mo Box of Minneapolis to check out a grave that's been opened and the body messed with. This is so weird that Box actually wondered if aliens were involved, but Mulder rejects that, which says a lot when Mulder goes for the terrestrial explanation over aliens. But then I figure aliens would just beam the bodies up or something before they did whatever sick thing aliens do with our corpses. Maybe practice taxidermy or something.
You're saying some human's been doing this.
If you want to call them that.
Yeah, that's what's unusual about this episode. Sort of. I'll try to explain. This is season 2. Chris Carter wrote the script, and what makes the episode different is that there is no supernatural element to this case. Donnie is just a guy. He's not alien, he's not supernatural, he doesn't have a third eye or something. He's not some mutant who's sucking the energy from the dead girls or anything like that. He's just a pervert that gives other perverts a bad name. But you might be thinking, why did he look like that before, all monstrous and that? Well, I believe what Carter was going for is twofold. First, Jeffrey Dahmer, who was caught not too long before this, was alleged to change shape in the eyes of his victims. But also, I think what he wants to show is that Donnie is a monster. He's just not a literal one. He's an even worse monster because he can't actually tell by looking at him. But aside of this, and a couple brief moments later on in a similar situation, he is absolutely normal. Well, you know what I mean. Fast forward 5 years later, and Donnie will be back in a story not written by Carter and guest starring Herschel from The Walking Dead. And suddenly, he was actually a demon the whole time. Now, obviously, if Carter didn't want this story to be made, it wouldn't have been made. But I have no doubt that this was never what was intended for the character. Not 5 years later to finally pay off with this rather unimportant story with a visual clue that was never otherwise followed up on in the episode. But anyway, the sight of it gets to Scully.
Nothing can prepare you for it. It's almost unimaginable.
Really? You don't seem fazed.
I prepared myself for it before we left Washington.
Mulder's contradicted himself lots of times, but not normally within 24 seconds. I usually expect him to go longer than it takes for a toilet tank to refill itself. Meanwhile, Donnie's trying to get a job here in the Twin Cities.
And what kind of work were you in before?
Don't say a grave robber. Don't say a grave robber. I was a human resource specialist. Heh, nothing but net. He's charming in an icy sort of way, so he talks his way into the job, unaware that his activity is drawing in more attention. They found some more graves dug out with his Flow V desecration style.
That the Twin Cities may have a escalating fetishist on their hands.
Not to be confused with an escalator fetish, which is largely harmless, but you will want to avoid using the handrails from now on. Mulder's convinced that someone this obsessed is going to start preying on the living so that he has a fresh supply of corpses. Plus, it'll save on the backhole rentals if he can cut out the middleman. Resources for something like this are limited because it's the weekend, so the cops all went home. Yeah. I get the feeling that people in Hollywood assume that if a city isn't frickin' Metropolis made manifest, that it's a one-horse town where the biggest worry is a cow wandering into the city. There's millions of people living in the Twin Cities, and when you have that kind of population, you're going to have crime, and when you have crime, you need cops. I mean, hell, New York City and Chicago had reputations as criminal cesspools when they were half the size of the Twin Cities. So the idea that not only do they not have enough cops to deal with this, but that there would be fewer on the weekend is, well, the weekend is when more people are going to be out on the streets and potentially getting into trouble instead of having their asses at work. For God's sakes, Minneapolis has a cop-to-citizen ratio just 10% less than Los Angeles does. But because it's not one of those big movie locations, everybody assumes that when Friday comes, all the cops head back to their tractors so that they can make sure the corn harvest isn't lost. Anyway, this means Mulder and Scully will have to stay to track the guy down. Only Scully seems a bit put off by all this. She gives her usual Scully report with that sense of detachment normally exhibited by HAL 9000, and yet her behavior suggests that she's deeply affected by all this. It's one of the themes of the episode.
It is somehow easier to believe, as Agent Fox does, in aliens and UFOs than in the kind of cold-blooded, inhuman monster who could prey on the living to scavenge from the dead.
Well, speak for yourself. The guy is gruesome, but the depravity human beings can sink to is a lot more believable than little gray men with anal probes. Donnie cruises the red light district and picks out a prostitute to come home with him.
Don't you have any heat in here? It's freezing.
The forced air unit is broken. I'd like to run you a bath.
Now, the thing to always remember when you're going to kill people, don't make mundane things sound creepy as hell. Now, granted, I suppose it could be worse. I'd like to run you a bath. Because I'd be willing to bet that once you take a career in having sex for money, you'd be up for most things, so long as the customer isn't acting like some barely contained madman. But it's the bedroom decorated with funeral wreaths that finally moves her creeped-out needle over the red line, so he kills her and dumps what's left of the body in the streets.
This time he took some fingers, too. Want to see the body?
Just try and stop me! Meanwhile, Donnie's settling into his new job, delivering frozen goods, and taking a moment to indulge in some of the fringe benefits, like sniffing the hair of the girls that he has pulled out of their trash. It's the intangibles in a job that really makes it going into work every day.
I just wanted to tell you, if we're ever not home, we always leave the back door open here.
Yes, there are some benefits that even a union can't get you. Meanwhile, Scully is performing the autopsy, hindered because Donnie gave that prostitute a cold bath, which clouds things like the time of death. But it's obvious that this case is starting to get to her, which leads to the question of, well, why? And also, why this week? Our last X-Files episode was the previous one, Aubrey, the story of a white male serial killer in a Midwestern city who mutilates his victims and comes from a family with lots of sisters and no brothers. Whereas this week, it's the story of a white male serial killer in a Midwestern city who mutilates his victims and comes from a family with lots of sisters and no brothers. The difference is that Aubrey's X-Files-ness was that idiotic genetic memory mind control voodoo bullshit, and Irresistible has none whatsoever. The thing that ties it to the X-Files is that it's about Scully, except I'm not getting why that's happening. Yeah, that's gruesome stuff, pointless murder for the purpose of sexual gratification, but if it's tied into Scully's own feelings regarding her abduction, well, I mean, the episode implies that it could make her feel more vulnerable to this kind of gruesomeness. Yet a nut slashing up girls with a straight razor and carving names into their chests doesn't even get in the way of her women's intuition about BJ being pregnant last time. I guess it just feels like it's out of nowhere that Scully has this sudden vulnerability to her. And even though Mulder keeps saying that this is the kind of stuff that cracks up the most seasoned agents, she's the only one who is affected. Agent Mo, for instance, just continues to Lenny Briscoe his way through this case like nothing.
If this guy looks regular-like and he doesn't have a record, he's going to be near impossible to find.
Well, what were you expecting? Some Adam West-style villain in a costume themed around necrophilia? Yes, it was me, the Grim Diddler! Donnie's actually taking some comparative religion courses at the local college because you don't want to deliver groceries forever, you know. People will beat a path to your door for a well-phrased answer to whether Islam or Christianity are closer in similarity to Judaism. The lecturer conveniently talks about stories about death wishes and that stories were a way to express fantasies considered too taboo in any other way. I understand this is a popular course with serial killers. Well, Donnie figures he's ready for the move to the big time and tries to abduct one of his classmates, but let me just say that, given that he was retconned into being a demon, Donnie is an unbelievable pussy, as she takes him out with just a couple of desperate flails and then gets him arrested. I mean, this is like seeing Satan get maced. Mulder and Scully are soon called down to the lockup, only a switcheroo is taking place because it isn't the guy that they came to see. Donnie is actually across the corridor, and he notices Scully and clearly wants to add her to his collection. So he starts questioning the other guy about the agents to try to track her down. Scully's flown back to Washington to try to track him down, and in doing so she gets another clue, a fingerprint on the victim, which leads them to Donnie's home. But alas, he's scarpered. He called the FBI pretending to be an agent and was given information on when she'd be coming back and all that, because why wouldn't you tell that to anyone who says they're an agent? We operate the FBI in the honor system, mister. So he stalks Scully and then rams her off the road. Who could have imagined that would have ended badly? While Mulder scrambles for a way to track down the car in the hopes of leading to Donnie and Scully, Donnie readies the ice bath of doom for her, and then comes in and does more of a shape-shifting thing. Not only in the demon form, but also in the forms of other people, which, again, is like the whole Jeffrey Dahmer thing. There's only one question that demands answering here, though.
Is your hair normal or dry?
No, not that. Are they going to allow Scully to overcome her fears and save herself, or have Mulder ride in and save the day? Well, for the moment, she catches him off balance and has to hide because the door won't open. After the FBI is done with him, the fire marshal will no doubt want to have a serious talk with Donnie about that violation. Well, Scully puts up a struggle, but Donnie wins in the end. His demon form catches her unawares, so he can knock the weapon away. So the winner is Mulder, coming to her rescue. Again. Stamping this episode is difficult. There's nothing really bad about it, although the way the episode seems to continue the theme of Scully as a victim does kind of rub me the wrong way. Indirectly, I suppose, she saved herself in that her idea to have a detailed exam of the body led to the fingerprint that ultimately led to her rescue. But even that was a clue found by someone else's thoroughness. I was also a little let down that after waiting the whole episode there was no X-Files twist. It's something that could have been done on any detective show, really. I mean, there are some definite pluses here, though, like Mulder seeming to be, on top of the detective game, using his experience and investigative skills to cut through things. It was a chance to show the skills that we were told were the reason that he was able to take on the X-Files. Nevertheless, I can't bring myself to actually recommend this, so I'm listing it as watchable. I'm not saying I would have been more satisfied with a supernatural or super scientific element, because as Aubrey showed, that doesn't always make things better. And of the two episodes, Irresistible is unquestionably superior. It's more like something was notable by its absence, because what made the X-Files special was the application of police procedural to speculative fiction. Part of the reason people have been clamoring for that Sherlock Doctor Who crossover, to see the fact-based detective story handling the fantastic. As I said, the episode just felt conspicuous by its absence.
Is your hair treated?
What?
Do you need a shampoo for chemically treated hair?